Hello and welcome to the Barrow. I am the Barrow White, and today I will be playing Factory Town, focusing on how to use logistics blocks and compute blocks with Rails and Minecarts. I created this tutorial because there are currently few instructional texts or videos available for how to use compute blocks, and when I revealed these mysterious lists of functions within the game, I had no idea how to use them. I'll be going through two layouts, both of which I haven't actually used in my towns. This means they may not really have practical uses in your factory towns, but the principles used to create them are a great introduction to the world of logistics and compute blocks. I'll be starting with a simpler rail system for two types of items and moving on to a more complicated multi-item setup. Let's get started. Here you see a closed loop rail system that picks up the items from the silos on the right and delivers them to the silos on the left using sorter and pusher blocks to ensure the cart goes to the correct receiving lane. It also uses several other compute blocks to determine which silo to fill next based on which one has the fewest items in it. Let's see it in action. Here you see it go up one of the lanes. It chooses stone. And the filters at the top say it has stone in it, so it delivers down the stone lane. Then this blocker is turned off, so it'll go to the wood lane. The filters say, oh, hey, there's wood in here, and it goes down the wood lane. And it turns the blocker back on, so it goes to the stone lane. This will continue to alternate until it runs out of stone in the originating silos. Now let's focus on how the filters work. Now let's see how this was built. We'll start with the silos that we want to fill and empty. The supply silos will have rail stops on their outputs, which is the red side, the red arrow side, and the receiving silos will have rail stops on their input side, which is the green arrow side. You can create the rail stops automatically by placing the silos first, then laying the rail over the input or output side as needed, as such. You drag that rail across those exits or entrances. Oops, let's get to the right thing right there. You'll see that rail stops were automatically created. So let's go ahead and finish the rest of the rail needed for this layout. Just gonna put all this track down as we build it before, making sure that the turns and the entrances and the exits that we need are there. What I'm building here is a exit lane for when the cart is empty, then it won't go by any of the silos. And that's the layout right there. Now let's add inventory sensors and number blocks so we can see what's in each of the silos. It's important to note that compute blocks update when they are triggered by another component of the game, like a minecart rolling over it or an item going in or out of it. So when I put these down, you won't actually see anything happening. Later, I'll show us how to use logic push blocks to update other blocks. So let's go ahead and put these sensors down. I've put out all the items that we'll be using down over here, and let's just click and hit C to copy and put these down where we want them. We're going to put one by each of the silos. And I'm going to put a number block. These look the same, but there's a counter block which adds when things go over it, and this is a number block which just is completely informational. And to make sure our layout is right, and let's go ahead and fix the rail here, because it looks like I put one just a little bit closer than it was supposed to be. Need some room there because we don't want that actually going on the output of that silo. There you go, that looks right. So now you see the inventory sensors at each one of these and the number blocks by each of those. And the way you do this is quite simple. You click the inventory sensor, you choose the offset up here, and then you right click. Very important, you right click on where it is going to check the inventory. There we go. Offset, right click. Offset, right click. Offset, right click. And now you choose that inventory sensor and you click it, and then you right click the number block. I did that. Click it, right click number blocks. So now if we look at it from this direction, we can get a feel of what's going what. You see the wide end of this line starting at the inventory sensor and going towards the silo to show that it's pointing to that to grab the information. And then you see the wide end of this line going from the inventory sensor to the number block to show that it's giving that information to the number block. We're also going to use a inventory sensor and a number block up here, and I'm going to go ahead and put it down, but we're going to use that for a little bit different reason, which we'll see in just a bit. Next, we'll add a minecart to see what happens. Sure to click that thing and turn it so that it's facing the right way and hit forward and let it go. So minecarts always travel in a straight line, and this will always go along a straight line and won't deviate until it is told what to do by the other blocks that we're going to be putting onto the game. What we want to do next is tell this minecart that if it's empty, it shouldn't go by any of these things here to unload them. Instead, it should go around the track and go back to the supply silos to pick up more stuff. Now we'll add a sorter block to tell the cart when it's empty to not go by any of the silos and empty, but instead go down the lane, go back to the silos, and see if there's something to pick up. And the way we'll do that is we'll click that inventory sensor, we'll choose the offset, and we'll have it point to the track right here. And so when that cart goes by, it'll see what's in the inventory. And then it'll point this right here to tell us how many items are in there. Now we're going to do a little math, and I'm using the copy feature to bring that math block over. And the math is going to say less than 1. And what that means is if there's nothing in the cart, it's going to do something. So less than 1. And so basically we're going to paint that, we're going to say if this sensor is less than 1, then it will activate the sorter that I'm going to put right here. And the way I'm doing that is, again, the lines are important, and the way you click it is important. You left click on the inventory sensor, and you choose the offset to choose it to tell it to point at the tracks to the rails, and you right click there. And then I left click the inventory sensor and right click the number block just so it'll give us that number whenever a cart goes by. And I also left click the inventory sensor and I right clicked the math block to send it whatever that number is as well. So we're sending the number to here to show us how much is in there, and to here to perform a math function on it. And the math function says if it's less than 1, then the math block will give us a 1, which means if it's 1 or greater, the math block will give us a 0. And it'll send the 1 or the 0 to the sorter. Let's see if this works. It did. So you see right there that that is on, but really it's always going to do that. So what you have to do is you have to set this to an offset state so that that will turn it off. That will turn it on, excuse me. Let's watch it one more time go around. There we go, simple as that. So every time the minecart goes here and the inventory sensor says there's nothing in it, it's going to activate this sorter and tell it to sort that cart up onto that rail there. So now I'm going to add some inventory sensors and a math block here to tell the cart which lane to go down if it has something in it, because if it has something in it, this sorter will be turned off and it'll continue straight in the line here. So the way we do that is I'm going to bring those inventory sensors over here. We're going to use a number block. Now the number blocks are great because they show us information, but they're not necessary. They don't perform any real calculations. They just show us things. And we're going to offset these to read the cart. So offset, when the cart is here, it's going to read it. When the cart is here, both of these inventory sensors are going to read it. And if you left click and then right click the number block, it'll actually give you the information on what's in there. So now when the cart comes through, both of these sensors will read that block and say, oh, there's a cart there. What does it have in it? And then if it's greater than 0, if wood is greater than 0, here, I'll just show you. I'm going to put a math block here, and we're going to say greater than 0. So it means if there's something in there, and if it is wood, pardon me. One thing I didn't do before, but I'm going to do now, is I'm going to set filters on each one of these item sensors. So it actually says, if we set that filter to wood, it'll say how much wood is inside that cart right there. And if it's greater than 0, then we're going to activate a pusher. So if it's greater than 0, it'll activate a pusher. So let's look at this a little bit more closely. This sensor reads the rails, and it's specifically filtered to look for wood. It'll tell you here how much wood is in there, but it'll also send that number to this math block, and if it's greater than 0, and it is wood, it's saying, I need to push the cart down the wood lane. Let's see if it works. And the way we're going to see if it works is we're going to add some wood to this silo here, because we know it'll go around that silo automatically. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to use the console command, add wood, and I'm going to add 100 wood in there. Now let's let it go and see what happens. It should go by here, pick up 20 wood. Let's watch it carefully. It's got wood in it. Here, because the number is no longer 0, it turned off the sorter. So it's no longer pushing it up there. So now this ought to read that there's more, that there's some wood in there. Look, it now says there's 20 wood in there. Here it says 20, but it doesn't say what it is. But here it says there's 20 wood, which means this pusher ought to be activated. What do you know? There it goes. And it puts it in the silo, and away it goes and picks up more wood. Let's see what happens here. Nothing. Fantastic. Oh, because it still has wood in it. So we'll let it go around a couple more times. I guess for this demonstration, I should have just put 20 wood in it. We'll let it continue to go around like this just a couple more times, and we'll see what happens when it finally gets to 0. It won't take us too long. Right, here's the last time around where it'll actually have wood in it. Now it's out of wood. When it goes to the silo, it won't pick up anything anymore. And now this filter will see that it doesn't have anything in it. It's less than 0. It'll activate this sorter and it pushes it up there. Good, that works. Here you see I've made a few changes. Actually, what I've done is I've reset all of our counters to 0, and I've added 100 into each of the silos. I've made sure that the inventory sensors have filters set so that it just shows us what's in each one of the silos. And I've also made sure that there's filters set on these inventory sensors. I have realized that I missed a step up here earlier, and let me show you what that was. The inventory sensor reads, you can see the yellow line, it points to the rail and says what's in the cart as it passes through there. It feeds that number to the right to the number block. But one thing I didn't tell it is to send that number to the math block. So once that number gets to the math block, it'll say if it's greater than 0, and if it is, it'll flip the pusher block. Let's see if this works now. Now another thing I've added to this setup right now is a blocker. I don't have any intelligence or any computation working on the blocker. I just have it set here so that it won't go into the wood lane. Instead, it'll go up to the stone lane. So we're going to test this. It should go up the stone lane, pick up some stone. This will tell us it's not 0, so it'll let it through. This will tell us it doesn't have wood in it. It has something else. And if it's wood, I'll push it here. We know that in this closed system, if it's not wood, it's stone. So I'll just automatically let it go through to this lane and let it go. So let's see if that works. It did work. So that was stone, and it will continue to pick up stone until it's out. Let's watch that real quickly. We'll let it go through a few times. And note what it does here with the flashing blue lines. It shows you where information is passing between the different compute blocks as they pass over it. Oh, that was really quick, too fast, but it actually pointed to here and here and here and here and here and here. So everywhere that I've been drawing these little arcs from one block to the next, it'll show you a line to show that, hey, we're checking data, but that only happens whenever a cart passes over it or inventory changes and something goes in or out of an item. So now there is 0 left here, which means when it goes up here, it should have 0 inventory. And what does that mean? If you said, well, if it's 0 inventory, it's going to push it onto this line, you're absolutely right. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next step of this part of the tutorial. Okay, now we come to the most complicated part of this tutorial, and this is where we're actually going to compute which of these has the most in it and tell it to go pick up the other item, if that's the case. So I've reset all the numbers. These are all set back to 0. I didn't set this one back to 0, so let's do that real quickly. It's back to 0, and we'll go ahead and set this one back to 0 as well. So everything's back to 0. I made sure there's nothing in these silos, and I filled each of these to 100. And I've also added the blocker here, and this blocker will is turned off. So this minecart will go pick up wood without a problem. So then let's go ahead and do a few things. This inventory sensor, if I left click it and offset it and right click the silo, it'll pick how much is in that. It'll check and see how much is in that silo and give us a number. If I left click and right click to this block, it will it'll put that number on the block and display it for us. And I've already done that here. The wood sensor says how much wood is in the silo and display it right here. So the next block we're going to add is math blocks. And what those will do is it'll check the number that we put into it against a formula. And we're going to use the greater than formula in both of them. And so we're going to take whatever that number of wood that this one finds, and in the silo, and we're going to left click that inventory sensor and right click the math block. So that's the number we're going to feed into it. We're going to say, is the number of wood greater than 1? Or is the number of stone, pardon me, greater than 1? Same thing here, left click and right click. Is the number of wood greater than 1? With greater than 1 is really not what we're looking for. What we're wanting to know is the number of wood greater than the number of stone? If it is, well, then we'll turn on this blocker so it'll pick up more stone. If the number of wood is not greater than the number of stone, then it'll turn this blocker off and go pick up more wood. And let's change this to greater than or equals to. So the last thing we need to add then is a logic set block, and I'll show you why. I'm going to click that, hit C, and copy it. And here's why. We're going to tell the logic set block how much stone is in here by left clicking and then right clicking the logic set block. And then we're going to feed that information over here by left clicking and right clicking to the math block. And what that does is this sets the number, so whatever the number of stone is, to this math block and puts it in the formula. So for instance, if we have 40 stone inside this silo, the inventory sensor will tell the logic set block to send the number 40 over here and add it to the formula. So the formula will, instead of saying greater than or equal to 1, will say greater than or equal to 40 that was sent from over there. And if it is greater, then we're going to have the math block send a signal to the blocker to change its status. So let's see if this works. It's going to pick up some wood. The filter will tell it it has wood and run it down the filter line. Okay. So the number of wood, 20, is definitely greater than 1. So because of that, it sends a signal over here which turned the blocker, which was off, to on. So this cart now knows that it's not supposed to pick up wood anymore. It's supposed to pick up whatever is up this line. It doesn't really have the intelligence to know what's up there, but we do. So it picks up the stone. The filter system here will run it down here. Now here's what's interesting. Now it has 20 stone here. And because I fed that information to the set block, which set this math block over here to change the formula, it's now saying if wood is, which is 20, is greater than or equal to 20, send a signal. So it's still going to leave it on. We'll pick up 20 more stone, run it up here. All right, so something's not working, right? Let's see if we can figure out what that is, because what should be happening is that when 20 is not greater than 1, it should be sending that information over here and flipping that. Here's the part that I forgot to put in here, and it's very important that I do this. I didn't see it because it's almost invisible over here. It's a logic pusher block. And here's what's super important. I'm gonna put one over here. The logic pusher block, when it gets a signal here, so whenever this cart goes in here, it's going to activate the logic pusher block, which will then activate this math formula over here. And the reason I'm doing that is that things in this line will not do anything unless a cart goes through there or the inventory in that silo changes. It's the only reason anything in this row would update. So what we want to do, we want all the formulas to change and the signals to change, even if something's happening over here. And that's what a pusher block does. The pusher block says, hey, something's happened over here. So because something has happened over here, let's update everything over here. And if it needs to, maybe flip the switch. So let's see if that works now. So now we're going to have a lot of stone over there. Now it worked. So what happened here is I finally had it right, and the cart came in and delivered that 60th block of stone, or it's not a block of stone, just a piece of stone into the silo. the silo says, hey, I've got 60 in here. It set the formula over here to 60. But then it also said, update the math, the actual math. This changed the formula, but this actually calculated the math. Just by simply saying, activate, go ahead and activate. And that's what the pusher block does. And let's look, it's very important that we see what it says right here. If we look at the pusher block, it says a block that triggers another block's output without modifying it. So it calculates this formula, which when this formula calculates and 20 is not greater than 60, then it's no longer going to turn this on, it's going to turn it back off. Simple as that. So now it'll go pick up wood. We'll watch it go around, picks up wood. 40 is still not greater than 60, so it's not going to turn this on. Now 60 is greater than or equal to 60, so it turned this on. It says, now let's pick up some more stone. Now 60 is not greater than 80, so it's not going to turn this on anymore. It's going to leave it off. And this will alternate back and forth. 80 is greater than 80, so it turns it back on. $80 is not greater than 100, so it's not going to leave it on. It's not going to turn it on. It's going to have it flip back off. And here's our last block of wood. Now here, 100 is not greater than 100, so it's going to go up stone again. There's nothing in there to pick up. So now it's back in the loop of going not by any of the receiving silos. So that's the end of part 1 of this tutorial. It demonstrates how to use all of the different compute blocks that we've been using, including the inventory sensor, the number block, the math block, the logic set block, and the logic pusher block. It may not really have a practical use in your town, but I think it gives you, at least it gives me, a good basic idea of how these blocks work. So in my next tutorial, which will be part 2 of this tutorial, I will demonstrate a multi-item system. So I'll give you a taste of that. And I'll go ahead and get rid of this just so it's not confusing, so nothing is confusing. And what this item will do, or what this layout will do, is have 3 different kinds of items and compare the silos to see which silo has the least stuff in it, and tell the cart to go to that silo and pick up more of that. But we'll do that in our next tutorial. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope it wasn't too confusing, and I hope to see you back when that next tutorial is done, and I hope it's good too. So thanks for visiting the Barrow. I'm the Barrow White. I am available here on YouTube, and I also stream on Twitch, so check it out.